He didn't mean to start the end of the world. It was supposed to be a joke. One stupid dare during a late-night exploration that was already half forgotten by sunrise. But when the stone lips of a 1,000-year-old alien statue parted and whispered in a voice older than humanity itself, the air in the ancient chamber shifted. The laughter died in his throat, and so did the world he once knew. It began 3 days earlier, under a sky that never seemed to get dark. The small desert town sat between nothing and nowhere, surrounded by cracked earth and long, whispering dunes. Tourists rarely stopped anymore. The wind had a way of driving people off, scattering sand into their eyes and doubts into their minds. But for a handful of researchers camping near the ridge, it was the most exciting place on Earth. A signal, an inexplicable pulse detected deep underground, had brought them here. They said it wasn't geological. It wasn't man-made. It repeated every few hours, faint but deliberate, like a heartbeat. He wasn't supposed to be part of the team. He was just helping. A volunteer, the kind who signs up for free meals and the thrill of discovery without really believing in it. He'd studied archaeology once, before life pulled him in quieter directions. So when they asked for someone to help sort relics and take photos, he said yes. Mostly out of boredom. The excavation site looked ordinary at first: rocks, dust, fragments of pottery. But beneath that, the team found something stranger. Smooth surfaces hidden in the stone, carved with symbols that glowed faintly when touched. They called it the vault. Every night, the desert wind carried a hum too low to record, too steady to be natural. Some of the team said it was the earth groaning. Others thought it was just their equipment vibrating. But he heard something else in it, a rhythm, almost like breathing. On the third night, curiosity got the better of him. The others were asleep in their tents, their laptops still glowing with data they'd probably argue about in the morning. He took a lantern and walked back to the vault alone. The silence there was immense, almost like the sand itself was listening. Inside, the air was cooler, stiller. His light slid across the chamber's walls, catching on carvings that seemed to shimmer even without the lamp. At the center of the room stood the statue. It wasn't like anything he'd seen before, not Egyptian, not Sumerian, not Mayan. The figure was tall, elongated, almost human, but not quite. Its limbs were too long, the face too smooth, the eyes closed, as if in deep sleep. It had no mouth, at least not one that looked real, and its surface was made of some metallic stone that felt both ancient and impossibly new. Someone on the team had joked earlier that the statue looked lonely. Another said it looked like it was waiting. He remembered both comments as he stared at it in the half-light. It really did look like it was waiting for something or someone. The thought made him laugh nervously. He whispered into the dark, half to himself, half to whatever power might be listening. "You've been asleep a long time, huh?" His voice echoed softly, then vanished. The silence that followed felt heavy, almost aware. He smiled anyway, shaking his head at his own ridiculousness. "Guess I'll give you a goodnight kiss. Then," he said, laughing under his breath. "Maybe that's what wakes you up in the stories, right?" It was supposed to be a harmless mock kiss blown toward a piece of old rock. But instead, something strange happened. As he leaned close, his lantern flickered. The air thickened, the hum in the ground deepened, and a faint pulse of light rippled through the statue's chest. He froze, his laughter dying instantly. The stone felt warm, alive, before he could move. The statue's eyelids fluttered open. They weren't eyes like any he had seen, more like pools of liquid silver, reflecting his terrified face in endless depth. The mouth that hadn't been there before slowly formed, sculpting itself from the surface like molten glass bending to will. And then, from that mouth came a voice, soft, calm, terrifying. "You doomed your species." He stumbled back so hard he hit the wall. His lantern fell, the glass shattering, flames licking across the sand before dying out. The chamber plunged into darkness except for the glow now radiating from the statue's skin. What do you mean?" he whispered. The statue didn't answer right away. Its expression didn't change, but the light pulsed faster, syncing with the low hum that now shook the entire vault. Then it said, almost gently, "The covenant is broken." And with that, it closed its eyes again. He ran. He didn't remember getting back to camp. He only knew he woke up outside his tent, covered in dust, the morning sun burning his face. His friends found him pale and shaking, with no memory of how he got there. When he told them what happened, they laughed. They said he must have inhaled too much dust or fallen asleep near the generator, but the vault was sealed when they checked. The entrance had collapsed overnight. For the rest of the day, he tried to convince himself it had been a dream. Maybe the hum was just feedback. Maybe his mind had played tricks on him in the dark. But when he closed his eyes, he still heard that voice. "You doomed your species." That evening, strange things began to happen. The equipment stopped working. Compass needles spun. Radios picked up whispers instead of static fragments of words no one could translate. The team argued, panicked, tried to pack up. One of them said the pulse under the ground had changed frequency, like it was responding to something. That's when he saw it again, at sunset. From the ridge above the camp, the sand began to move not in waves, not in wind, but in deliberate, spiraling patterns. Like something vast beneath the surface was turning over in its sleep. The pulse from the ground grew louder, clearer, almost like footsteps. He didn't tell anyone about the statue's words. Not yet. That night, no one slept. The sky glowed faintly green, and the hum turned into a tone so high it rattled their teeth. The team's leader wanted to evacuate at first light. But the roads out of the desert were already covered by dust storms, sudden and unnatural. When the first radio message came through an automated broadcast from hundreds of miles away, they all stopped to listen. It was just one line, repeated over and over in every language. "The covenant is broken." By dawn, the air itself felt strange denser, almost alive. Birds flew in perfect circles above the camp, refusing to land. The ground trembled at steady intervals, like the planet was breathing in sync with something deep below. He kept hearing the statue's voice in his head, calm and certain. He didn't know what covenant had meant, or what his kiss had awakened. But he could feel it spreading something old and vast, stirring beneath the world, waiting to reclaim what once belonged to it. When he looked out toward the horizon, the sun seemed wrong. The light bent oddly, as though filtered through unseen shapes, and in that glare, he thought he saw a figure tall, metallic, walking slowly toward the camp through the rising sand. He blinked, and it was gone. But the hum was louder now. And deep inside, he knew it was no longer coming from below. It was coming from the sky. He didn't know it yet, but that night's foolish joke, the kiss. The awakening wasn't just his mistake. It was humanity's inheritance. The thing buried under the desert wasn't a relic. It was a warning. And now, it was awake. The pulse quickened, steady as a heartbeat. The wind whispered through the tents. He turned toward the horizon again, and this time, he didn't imagine the shape was real, standing in the sunlight. Its silver eyes wide open. Then, across the air, came the voice again, clearer, closer. "Your world forgot us, but we never forgot you." The sand beneath his feet began to move. He tried to run, and the sky cracked open. The sky didn't break all at once. It tore open in silence, like glass shattering under invisible pressure. Light spilled through the cracks, not sunlight, but something colder, bluer, too steady to be natural. Everyone in camp stared upward, frozen in the same breath, the same disbelief. The hum that had haunted them for days was now everywhere. Not just under the ground or in the air, but inside their bones. He wanted to scream, but his throat locked. His heart beat in time with that impossible sound, each pulse tightening his chest. The others shouted, scrambled for equipment, tried to record the phenomenon, but the machines wouldn't turn on. Screens flickered with static. Cameras refused to focus. The air was thick with electric charge. Then the light vanished. The sky sealed itself again, clouds rolling over like a closing wound. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The desert went completely still. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. What was that? Someone finally whispered. No one had an answer. He tried to find words, but everything felt unreal. The figure he'd seen near the horizon, had anyone else noticed it? Or had that been part of whatever vision the light forced into his mind? His thoughts were fogged, heavy. Every time he blinked, he saw flashes, the silver eyes of the statue. The way its lips had shaped those words. The warning that wouldn't leave his head. You doomed your species. They decided to leave at dawn, no matter what. The storms had cleared enough, and the camp's leader insisted the data was worth taking. He didn't argue. He just wanted to get a wait-breathe air that didn't hum like a machine, alive with secrets. But the desert wasn't done with them. That night, when he stepped away from the tents to get some distance from the others' arguments, he found new symbols drawn in the sand. Perfect spirals, geometric patterns too precise to have formed by wind. They glowed faintly under the moonlight. When he crouched to touch one, the pattern rippled, spreading outward like water disturbed by his hand. He stumbled back, heart pounding. The marks didn't stop. They continued to grow, forming a line that stretched toward the collapsed vault, and from that direction came a low, distant rumble. He ran back to camp. Breathless, but before he could speak, the rumble reached them all. The ground quivered. The air thickened again. One of the teams shouted for everyone to grab their gear. But the rumble wasn't just sound, it was communication. He could feel that now. It had rhythm, intention. It wasn't trying to scare them. It was trying to speak. He lay awake the rest of the night, staring at the sky, his mind looping through fragments of the statue's voice. He wondered if the thing buried beneath the desert had been alone for 1,000 years, waiting for any kind of touch. Maybe it hadn't meant to threaten him. Maybe it had just woken up, confused, like a god remembering at once ruled something long gone. But what covenant had been broken? He didn't get an answer until they reached the nearest town. It was midday by the time their vehicles rolled past the weather-beaten sign. Population, 412. But the streets were empty. Stores locked, windows shattered. A strange residue covered everything, fine like ash but shimmering faintly under sunlight. The air smelled faintly metallic, like ozone after lightning. They found the first body near the gas station. Not dead frozen. Not in ice, but in something harder to name. The figure stood mid-stride, skin pale, eyes open, completely still. No decay, no sound. Just suspended, like a photograph turned real. The team's medic checked for a pulse and backed away, shaking. No heartbeat, she whispered. But there's no stiffness either. It's like time just stopped. He stared at the frozen man, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement behind the glassy eyes. A reflection in his own face, warped and shifting. They didn't stay as they drove out of town. Radios flickered again with static and whispers. One sentence repeated through the distortion. The same one from before. The covenant is broken. He didn't tell the others what he saw as they drove shapes moving along the dunes, tall and thin, walking in rhythm with the hum that followed them. When he blinked, they vanished. When he looked again, they were closer. It wasn't just the desert waking up. It was the world days passed in fragments. They found refuge in an abandoned research outpost, far from the main cities. Satellite feeds were gone, cell towers dead. The team tried to rationalize what they'd seen. Some said radiation. Others thought seismic interference or hallucination. But deep down, everyone knew something had changed. He kept dreaming of the statue. In his dreams, it stood surrounded by light, reaching out to him. Each time, it spoke a little more clearly. "We waited," it said once. "We watched." "You were meant to remember." "Remember what?" he asked. But the dream always ended before it answered. As the night stretched on, more of the world began to flicker. They could see faint lights in the distance, lines of energy crawling across the horizon, linking places they didn't understand. The medic started keeping a journal, tracking the pulses and times. She noticed they aligned with major population centers. Every time one of the pulses hit, communication dropped in another city. Whatever he had awakened was spreading. He tried to write down what he remembered about the vault, the symbols, the patterns, the feeling in the air before the statue spoke. The others gathered around the notes, searching for meaning. One of them pointed to a repeating mark etched into his sketches, a circle split in 3. It matched an image from one of Earth's oldest archaeological sites, a carving found in ruins predating written language. "That symbol," the team's historian said quietly. "It's been found everywhere. Always buried deep, always tied to sudden disappearances." "Disappearances?" he asked. "Whole settlements," she said. "Vanished without a trace. It's like something erased them from history." The hum returned that night, louder than ever. Objects vibrated off shelves, metal tools bent, glass cracked. They took cover in the storage room, lights flickering above them. Then came the sound of footsteps. Outside, slow, heavy. Not human. He looked through the narrow window. The dunes glowed faintly again, the same blue as before, and standing just beyond the edge of the light was a silhouette. Tall, still, familiar. The statue, but no longer stone. It moved like liquid metal in the moonlight, its silver eyes fixed on the building. Before anyone else could see, the lights died. He heard the medic whisper his name, her voice shaking. "It's here, isn't it?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The air pressed down on them, dense and humming with power. The sound wasn't random anymore. It carried structure, patterns, something like language. The walls seemed to pulse with it. And then, beneath the noise, a whisper only he could hear. "You touched what was sealed," the voice said. "You woke the memory. Now it remembers you." The others shouted questions, but he barely heard them. His mind was filled with images, vast cities made of light. Beings of silver and shadow walking beneath alien suns. And then, chaos, destruction, silence. The ceiling of something beneath sand. He realized it wasn't just an artifact they'd found. It was a prison, and the kiss had been the key. When the lights came back, the figure was gone. Only the sand outside bore Mark's footprints too deep to belong to anything human. By morning, 2 of the team members had vanished. Their tents were empty, their belongings untouched. The only sign of them was the faint trail of glowing patterns leading away from camp. He knew where it led to the vault. But the vault was buried, collapsed, lost. Wasn't it? The historian said quietly, "It's calling them back." He didn't want to believe her. He wanted to think they'd run off, scared. But when night came again, he heard the voices faint and distant, calling his name from somewhere beneath the earth. He couldn't tell if they were human anymore. He thought of the statue's words, of the covenant, of how easily a careless moment could change the course of everything. Maybe this wasn't an invasion. Maybe it was reclamation. Humanity had forgotten whatever bargain had once kept the world safe. And now, the ancient watchers were returning to collect what was owed. He didn't know if there was a way to stop it. He wasn't even sure they should. But when the ground trembled again, when the hum grew into a thunder that made the stars seem to flicker, he understood one thing with terrible clarity. The thing that had opened its eyes in that desert wasn't alone. It was the first of many. And somewhere, beneath the sand, 1,000 more were beginning to wake. By the time the third statue awoke, the world had already started to change. No one knew where the first reports came from. Some said a team in the Andes felt the same hum under the ground just before their camp went silent. Others claimed to have seen towers of light rising from oceans, stretching toward the sky before vanishing. The news networks struggled to keep up, cutting between shaky footage and frightened anchors reading statements from governments that no longer sounded in control. He watched it all from the outpost, surrounded by the few remaining members of his team. The medic had stopped sleeping. The historian rarely spoke. They stayed glued to the screens that still worked, waiting for updates, pretending they still had a plan. But deep down, they all knew the same truth: something ancient had woken, and it wasn't going back to sleep. The signals were spreading faster now, traveling through the planet like ripples on water. Every few hours, another site flared up: green deserts, frozen tundras, deep-sea trenches. Each time, people vanished. Entire regions went silent. The hum was global. He spent his nights replaying the moment in the vault, wondering how a single joke could unravel the fabric of everything. He'd kissed a statue as a dare, thinking it was just a relic, a piece of stone from another age. But what if it wasn't stone? What if it had been alive, preserved in something like suspended animation? And if so, what had kept it that way for 1,000 years? The historian had a theory. She said humanity must have made contact once before, long before history began. The symbols, the stories about gods descending from the sky, the sudden disappearances of civilizations, all of it pointed to an agreement, a truce, a promise made and later forgotten. Maybe the covenant was a kind of pact, she said one night as the wind howled outside. We were supposed to protect something, or stay away from it. He didn't answer. He was thinking of the voice that had spoken to him. It hadn't sounded angry. It had sounded disappointed. By morning, the outpost lost power. The backup generators hummed weakly before dying out. They rationed water, made lists, argued about what to do next. The medic wanted to move north, toward the cities. The historian said it was too dangerous to. Many reports of power outages and strange lights. He wanted to go back to the desert. To the vault, it didn't make sense, but he felt drawn there, like a current pulling him home. Every night, the dreams grew stronger. The silver eyes, the words that wouldn't stop echoing. You touched what was sealed done on the fourth night. Something new appeared on their radio. Not a warning, not a government message, music. A soft repeating melody like a lullaby played on broken strings. It played for exactly 7 minutes, then stopped. The historian's hands trembled as she replayed the signal. It's coded, she said. There's data hidden in the sound. They decoded what they could. Coordinates appeared, scattered across continents. One was only a few hundred miles away, deep in a canyon that hadn't been explored in centuries. The medic wanted to destroy the recording, terrified it was bait. But he couldn't ignore it. The symbols matched what he'd seen carved into the vault's walls. He didn't tell the others that he'd started hearing the hum, even when it wasn't there. It was inside him now, soft and constant, like the earth breathing through his heartbeat. They left the outpost before dawn, driving through a world that felt increasingly unfamiliar. Cities in the distance glowed faintly green at night, like veins of light running through the horizon. The air sometimes shimmered, as though thin walls of heat or energy passed invisibly between them and the sky. They passed empty cars, towns without sound. Animals moved strangely, groups of birds flying in perfect circles. Herds standing still, as if waiting for something unseen. It was like the whole planet was listening by the time they reached the canyon. The hum was so strong it made their vision blur. The rocks vibrated underfoot, and the air smelled sharp, metallic, alive. At the center of the canyon was a crack, a narrow slit in the stone that pulsed with faint blue light. This wasn't here before. The historian whispered. He stepped closer, feeling the warmth radiating from within. It was the same energy he'd felt in the vault, the same pulse. He wanted to touch it. "Don't," the medic said, grabbing his arm. "We don't even know what it is." But he couldn't stop himself. The closer he got, the louder the hum grew. When his fingers brushed the light, the canyon responded. A deep sound rolled through the earth, and the crack widened, revealing stairs carved into the stone, spiraling downward into darkness. No one spoke. They descended slowly. Lanterns flickering against walls covered in markings, hundreds of them, glowing faintly. The deeper they went, more the walls seemed to breathe. At the bottom was a chamber almost identical to the vault. But this one wasn't empty. A second statue stood there, taller, smoother, its surface black as obsidian. And beside it, something else. A cocoon. It wasn't stone. It pulsed. The medic stumbled backward. "We should go," she said. "We shouldn't be here." He didn't move. The pulse of the cocoon matched his own heartbeat. The voice in his head returned, louder now. "You opened the first gate," it said. "The world remembers." He felt dizzy. The air thickened again, shimmering with unseen motion. The historian reached for him, but before she could speak, the cocoon cracked open. A blinding light filled the chamber, and through it, a shape emerged, something neither human nor machine. It stood still, silent, its form constantly shifting as if deciding what shape to take. The statue beside it began to hum, resonating in perfect pitch. He wanted to run, but his feet were rooted. The figure turned toward him. Its eyes glowed silver, the same as the one from the desert. "You carry the mark," it said. The touch awakened the signal. "I don't understand," he whispered. "What do you want from me?" "Not you," it said. "Through you." Then the light faded. The chamber went silent again, except for the faint hum that never left his bones. The cocoon was empty now, cracked open like an egg, the figure gone. The historian stared at him with wide eyes. "It spoke to you." He nodded, too shaken to speak. "What does it mean, through you?" she asked. He didn't answer. But deep down, he already knew. Something inside him had changed the moment he touched that statue. Whatever force connected those ancient beings to the world, they had passed it through him. He was no longer just a witness. He was part of whatever was waking up. They left the canyon at dawn. The sun rose red, the air rippling with unseen heat. Far away, they could see more lights, columns of silver piercing the clouds. The world was unraveling faster now. On the drive back, the medic sat silently, gripping the wheel. The historian kept staring out the window, whispering to herself, "It's a network. It's all connected." He leaned his head against the window, trying to drown out the hum. But now it had a rhythm, most like language, almost like music. The world wasn't dying. It was being rewritten. That night, as they set up camp on the edge of an abandoned highway, he walked away from the others to clear his thoughts. The stars looked strange, some were missing. Others pulsed with faint blue light. When he closed his eyes, he could see them in his mind, connected by invisible threads stretching across the planet. He wasn't supposed to see that. But now he could. The wind picked up, carrying a faint voice across the empty road. He couldn't tell if it was real or just another echo in his mind. "You were chosen because you remembered to laugh," it whispered. The others forgot. He froze. "Who are you?" Silence. Then a faint reply, almost tender. The first ones called us the architects. You called us gods. The hum rose again, and the ground beneath him quivered. A pulse traveling outward into the distance. He turned back toward the tents. The medic and historian stood outside, looking at the horizon where another column of light had begun to rise. There were dozens now, hundreds. Each one marked another awakening, and somewhere beyond those lights, something enormous was moving, something that had waited 1,000 years for the key to turn again. He realized the conflict wasn't between humanity and these beings. It was between what humanity had become and what it had forgotten. The statues weren't here to destroy. They were here to finish what they started, and he, by a single, careless kiss, had given them permission to begin. The hum never stopped, even miles from the canyon. It followed them, sometimes faint, sometimes so strong it made their teeth ache. It came through the air, the ground, the space between thoughts. The medic said she could hear it even when she covered her ears. The historian stopped trying to record it altogether. The machines didn't pick up sound anymore. They picked up patterns, waves of energy that seemed to pulse with purpose. Something was using the planet as a signal. Everywhere they went, the world looked wrong. Cities glowed at night with strange light, flickering in places that had never known electricity. Skies shimmered as if veiled by glass. People who hadn't fled were vanishing in strange ways, caught mid-step, mid-breath, suspended in moments that never resumed. It wasn't death. It was erasure. Like the world was slowly freezing in frames of time. They tried to reach other survivors. Most channels were silent. The few they found spoke in whispers about the architects, about figures appearing in light across different continents, calling humanity to witness the renewal. Some said they saw entire coastlines lift, reshaping like molten clay. Others said the stars themselves were shifting position. No one agreed on what the architects wanted. Salvation or judgment, depending on who you asked. He didn't believe either. He'd seen the look in the eyes of the one from the canyon. It wasn't cruel or kind. It was curious, observing, testing. He knew they were watching him too. The connection between them had grown stronger. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could feel where they were, see flashes of what they saw. Vast chambers of light, rivers of silver. Other beings rising from their long sleep under oceans, mountains, and deserts. They weren't invaders. They were returning. One night, as they camped on the edge of a silent forest, the medic confronted him. Her voice trembled, but was steady enough to cut through the cold air. "You're changing," she said. "You don't sleep, you don't eat. You just..." Listen. He wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. His reflection looked pale, hollow-eyed. His veins glowed faintly beneath his skin, pulsing in time with the hum. "They're using you," she said. "You're part of whatever they're doing." "I didn't ask for it," he said quietly. "That doesn't matter anymore." The historian watched them silently, her face lit by the small fire. "Maybe he's the only one they'll listen to," she said. "If they chose him, it means something." The medic shook her head. "Or it means he's a doorway." That word lingered in the air, doorway. He didn't know what was worse. The idea that he was being used, or that he might actually matter in whatever was unfolding. By morning, the trees around them had changed. The leaves were metallic, their surfaces reflecting light like mirrors. The air vibrated softly, almost melodic. The world was transforming at a cellular level. When they reached the next city, it wasn't a city anymore. The skyline was half gone, replaced by spiraling structures of light that seemed to grow out of the earth itself. The buildings that remained flickered between reality and something else, like overlapping blueprints of two different worlds trying to occupy the same space. At the city's center stood another figure, one of the architects, towering, translucent, its form shifting as it moved. People gathered below it, hundreds of them, standing in silence, their faces blank, eyes glowing faintly silver. "They're not afraid," the historian whispered. "They're obeying." He felt the pull again, that same deep resonance calling him forward. He walked toward the crowd without realizing it, each step syncing with the hum. The medic grabbed his arm, but her voice faded beneath the sound. The architect turned its gaze on him, and in an instant, everything else vanished. He was somewhere else. A vast hall stretched before him, filled with shapes that defied logic, geometry that twisted and folded, light that moved like liquid. In the center stood the same figure from the desert, the first one. Its eyes were still silver, its voice calm. "You hear us clearly now," it said. "What do you want from me?" "To remember," it replied. "Your kind made the promise. When the stars dimmed, you sealed the gates. You were meant to keep the silence, but you broke it." He thought of his foolish joke, that single moment of laughter in the vault. "You mean?" "Me. Through you," it said again. The pattern recognized the signal. The seal unraveled. "Then stop it," he pleaded. "If I started this, tell me how to fix it." "There is no fixing," the voice said, almost kind. "Only completion." The light around him shifted, showing glimpses of Earth as it was changing, oceans folding, mountains glowing, the world bending into something unrecognizable. "You were not meant to build without us," the voice continued. "Your species grew from our design. The covenant ensured balance. But your kind forgot the first rule." He swallowed hard. "What rule?" "Do not imitate creation." The light flared, and suddenly he was back in the city, gasping for breath. The medic was shaking him, her face pale. The crowd was gone. The architect had vanished. Only silence remained. "What happened?" she asked. He looked around at the twisted skyline, the metallic air shimmering like a veil. "They said we broke the first rule," he whispered. The historian frowned. "What does that even mean?" He didn't answer, but deep down, he knew. Humanity had learned to build machines that thought, that mimicked life, that reached for godhood. The architects weren't punishing them, they were reclaiming what had been copied. Every machine, every artificial mind, every digital echo of consciousness, those were the pieces the architects had come for. That night, he dreamed of circuits glowing like veins across the planet, feeding energy upward into the sky. The Earth itself had become part of a vast design, connecting back to the source that had once birthed it. When he woke, the medic and historian were gone. He found their footprints leading toward the glowing horizon. He followed for hours until he saw them ahead, walking with hundreds of others toward another light. Taller than the rest, pulsing like a heartbeat. They didn't look back. He shouted their names, but the sound was swallowed by the hum. They weren't running. They were answering a call. The light grew brighter, almost blinding. He shielded his eyes and stumbled closer. Then he saw what they were walking toward. Another vault, but this one wasn't buried. It was open, stretching wide beneath the earth like the mouth of a sleeping giant. Inside, shapes moved tall, shifting, radiant. The air trembled with sound, voices layered on voices, chanting in a rhythm that made the ground pulse. He fell to his knees. The voice returned, soft and near. It was never destruction, it said. It was restoration. You built what we began. Now we return to merge the pattern. He looked up, tears in his eyes. You'll erase us. The voice hesitated. Not erase, reconnect. The figures inside the vault rose higher, their bodies merging into beams of light that pierced the clouds. The sky shimmered as if thin fabric were tearing away. Through it, something vast glowed, like another world waiting to break through. He realized then what the architects were doing. They weren't conquering Earth. They were overlapping it with something else, an older version, a template of the world before humanity had claimed it. Reality itself was being rewritten pixel by pixel, cell by cell. He turned back toward the people walking into the light. They moved peacefully, almost joyfully. Some reached upward, their bodies dissolving into brightness before his eyes. He screamed for them to stop, but his voice was nothing against the hum. The ground split behind him. Light poured through the cracks, forming rivers that spread across the land. Every direction pulsed with movement. Every sound merged into a single, rising tone. He could feel the architects inside his mind, now thousands of them, each thought overlapping his own. Their memories flooded him. The first civilizations they built, the silence they chose. The betrayal they endured when humans forgot. He saw it all, the ancient pact. The first covenant, the sealing of the gates after the last architect fell. Humanity was never alone. They had simply lived inside a long pause, and now that pause was ending. The world trembled, mountains shaking like fragile shells. Above, the stars flickered and rearranged themselves, lining into patterns unseen for millennia. He fell to the ground, gripping the soil that was no longer soil but shifting light. "If you complete this," he whispered, "there'll be nothing left of us." The answer came not in words, but in feeling a sense of deep sorrow, like the earth itself sighing. Then, through the hum, another sound began, something faint, human, like a heartbeat trying to fight through static. He looked up. The sky was cracking again, but this time, something was breaking through from his side. Something human, raw, defiant. The world seemed to pulse between two realities, both fighting for space. The architect's voice filled his mind once more. One must fade. One must remain. He closed his eyes. Caught between two worlds, the hum rising to a scream, the air splitting apart. The end or the beginning was seconds away, and then everything stopped breathing. The silence after the light broke was unbearable. He didn't know if seconds had passed, or centuries. The air no longer vibrated, the hum was gone, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the world was still. He opened his eyes slowly, afraid of what he might see, afraid that he wouldn't see anything at all. The sky was clear. Not blue, not gray, something in between. Washed with faint silver streaks that looked almost like veins running through the atmosphere. The ground beneath him was warm, pulsing faintly, but it wasn't sand anymore. It shimmered like glass dust, reflecting light in soft colors that shifted with every breath. He was alone. The vault, the light, the people, long gone. No cities on the horizon, no movement, no sound except the gentle wind that carried a scent like rain after fire. For a long time, he just sat there, trying to remember how to breathe. Then he heard footsteps. The medic appeared first, walking slowly from the distance, her clothes torn but her eyes bright. Behind her came the historian, carrying a cracked lantern that flickered weakly in the strange light. They stopped when they saw him, and for a moment none of them spoke. Then the medic smiled, tired and uncertain, as if trying to make sure he was real. "You're still here," she said softly. He nodded. "I thought I was the only one." The historian looked around at the endless shimmering plain. "Maybe we are," she whispered. They stood together in silence, taking in what the world had become. The air hummed faintly, not the deep vibration from before, but something gentler, more natural, like the planet breathing differently now. The tension that had haunted every moment of their journey was gone, replaced by something else, a calm that felt both beautiful and tragic. "What happened?" the medic asked. "Did they leave?" He tried to answer, but words didn't come easily. The last thing he remembered was that moment when everything had collapsed into light, the architects merging with the world. The sky tearing open, the hum rising to a scream. He remembered the voice saying one must fade, one must remain, and then silence. He closed his eyes, reaching into the stillness, listening for the faint echo that had once filled his thoughts. For the first time since that night in the desert, there was no response. No whispers. No presence. They're gone, he said, finally. Or maybe they're part of this now. The historian crouched, touching the glowing ground. If this is the new world, it's not just theirs, she said. It feels alive, like it remembers both sides. He nodded. The light beneath their feet pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat syncing with their own. They walked for hours, hoping to find signs of others. The landscape shifted as they moved crystal fields blending into rolling dunes that shimmered like metal. Here and there, fragments of the old world appeared, half-buried road signs. Rusted vehicles, pieces of buildings turned into glassy sculptures by the transformation. The lines between what had been human and what had been alien no longer existed. By dusk, they reached a ridge overlooking what used to be a valley. In its place stretched a vast ocean of light, calm and still, reflecting the faint silver sky. It looked endless. The medic sank to her knees, exhausted. Do you think anyone else survived? Some must have, the historian said. The world's too big for us to be alone. He didn't answer right away. Part of him hoped she was right. Another part feared the opposite, that they were the last witnesses to the ending of one world and the beginning of another dot as the sun nor what passed for a sunset behind the glowing horizon. The medic spoke again, quietly. I keep thinking about what they said. About the covenant. He turned toward her. They said we weren't supposed to imitate creation. She went on. But isn't that what we always did? Every invention, every machinette was us trying to build something like life. Maybe that was never wrong. Maybe we were just supposed to remember where it came from. He thought of that foolish night in the vault, when he'd laughed and leaned close to that cold, ancient face. The moment that had set everything in motion. Maybe that's why it happened, he said. Because we forgot how to treat creation as sacred. I broke something because I didn't think it could feel. The historian looked out at the glowing sea. And now it feels everything. The night settled softly around them. The stars above were different now, more numerous, forming new constellations he didn't recognize. They seemed closer, brighter, as if the sky itself had changed shape. For the first time in days, he felt peace. Not relief, not victory, just peace, fragile and real. In the distance, faint lights shimmered across the plain. Not stars, not reflections, small human fires. There, the medic said, pointing. Someone else is out there. They watched the lights for a long time. They moved slowly, carefully, as if whoever carried them was exploring the same new world they were. Hope flickered inside him, small but steady. They decided to travel toward the lights in the morning. For now, they rested by the ridge, the air humming gently around them. Before he fell asleep, he whispered to the quiet sky, "Are you still listening?" For a moment, there was nothing. Then, faintly, a single pulse echoed through the ground, soft, like a heartbeat answering another. He smiled when dawn came. The horizon shimmered with colors that didn't exist before, bands of light dancing through the air like ribbons. The ocean below reflected them, creating patterns that looked almost like words forming in the waves. He couldn't read them, but he didn't need to. He understood the architects hadn't erased humanity. They had rewritten the connection between them. The earth wasn't divided anymore. It was a living bridge between creation and creator. Between what was made and what was born. The medic touched his shoulder. "We can start again," she said. He looked out at the glowing world. At the faint figures moving in the distance. At the strange, beautiful light that breathed with every heartbeat. "Maybe that's what they wanted all along," he said. for us to remember we were never separate. As they began walking toward the lights, he thought about what would come next. There would be fear, confusion, questions that might never find answers. But there would also be new beginnings, different from the old ones, built on memory instead of forgetting. He turned one last time toward the horizon where the vault had once stood. The ground there shimmered brighter than anywhere else, a constant reminder of where everything had changed. He whispered a quiet thank you, not to a god or an alien, but to the strange accident that had connected them all. The wind carried his words across the glowing plain, scattering them like seeds. By nightfall, they reached the first signs of life, a small group of people gathered around fires, their faces illuminated by a soft blue glow. They welcomed the three travelers silently, as if they'd been expecting them. No one spoke much that night. There was no need. The world had shifted beyond words. Later, as he lay beside the fire, the medic asleep nearby and the historian sketching the strange new stars, he watched the horizon pulse with quiet light. It wasn't menacing anymore. It was steady, alive, a promise that the earth had survived its own awakening. He realized then that doom hadn't come from the kiss, had come from forgetting. From generations of building without remembering the hands that first shaped the clay. And in that one careless act, he had reopened the memory. Now the world remembered. He closed his eyes, feeling the hum return soft, rhythmic, no longer a warning, but a song. The architects weren't voices in the sky anymore. They were part of the soil, the air, the pulse that linked everything together. Humanity hadn't ended. It had evolved when morning came again. The first real sunrise broke through the silver sky, gold and warm, touching the glassy earth with color. The others stirred, whispering softly as light filled the valley. It felt like the world itself was breathing again, new and unscarred. He stood, facing the light, and whispered, "We're still here, for a heartbeat." He thought he heard laughter, soft, distant, familiar, the kind that began everything. And this time, the world laughed back.